Hello, class, and welcome back. Um, so, as the email said, and as I would like to reiterate, it was really nice to talk to all of you over the middle of the week last week. I got the sense from all of you that you're making a lot of really positive progress in processing the information that I am giving you for this class. And the thing that's really great for me to hear is that a lot of you are processing it with regard to the specific environment and the specific community that you are finding yourself in your various home places. One of the things I said to every single person on the phone was, as the rest of the semester develops, I would like for you all to kind of report back to us as a class about your experience in that locale that you find yourselves within. What's going on in those environments? What kind of artwork are you looking at? What kind of gallery structure are you seeing or not seeing? What alternative structures are there available for you to explore? It's really interesting the variety of different structures that you're all engaging within. Some of you have very academic structures, some of you have very more experimental structures to engage with, and that's the stuff that all of us will benefit from hearing more specifically or more directly over the course of the next semester, or not the next semester, over the rest of our semester, excuse me. So one of the things that I wanted to do today was get us out of the conversation around money and into something that could be seen as a little bit more intellectually engaging. Specifically, I understand that reading about the art market can be a tad dry, especially with the reportage of statistics, but now that we have an understanding of how that all works, or at least enough of an understanding to make comfortable moves in whatever structure you find yourself within, I think it's important to change the tone a bit. And one of the ways to do that, or the way that I think is going to be the most beneficial for all of us, is actually to talk a little bit about how the art market works for us, or more specifically, the reasons why it's awesome to go to galleries. It's the reasons why it's important to see shows. The reasons why it's important to leave your home, your studio, your perceived comfort zone, and engage in something a little bit bigger. And the simplest reason for that is making good work is almost always going to involve a conversation with something else. What that something else is up to you and up to your studio practice, but Cubism wouldn't have been developed were it not for the developments of cinema and the developments of avant-garde painting at the same time. Had Picasso and Braque just been going to the cinema, Cubism would look different. But because they were doing both of those things in tandem, they were able to explore a different kind of aesthetic practice that would bridge those two gaps, or bridge the gap between those two cultural entities. And so getting out, seeing things, is kind of the subtext of this entire course. And so in moving us out of a conversation about the art market and into something else, I want to talk to you about what I've seen and specifically how I want to talk to you about what I've seen. So to start off, it's important to go through, or to cover this specific term. This term is one that I find to be very important for our conversation. It is a term that I am using as the title of my exhibition here at Flux Factory. It is a term that has a very specific meaning in the article from which it is pulled, but it has a much broader definition that I am going to elicit today, right now. So that term is tournament of value. So According to Arjan Appadura, a tournament of value is a complex periodic event or series of events, that's my inclusion there, that are removed in some culturally well-defined way from the routines of economic life. Participation in them is likely to be both a privilege for those in power and an instrument of status contest between them. The currency of such tournaments is also likely to be set apart through well-understood cultural diacritics. Finally, what is at issue in such tournaments is not just status, rank, fame, or reputation of actors, but the disposition of the central tokens of value in the society in question. Okay, so what is Appadura saying? The way that I understand tournament of value and the way that I want to explain tournament of value is it's this moment in a very long life of an object where specifically what Appadura is speaking about is where that thing becomes commodified, where money is associated with that thing, and all of the cultural weight associated with the thing is correlated to a monetary exchange. And so something like a pricing script is a factor inside of a tournament of value that is based around market exchange. So when someone is selling a work of art, they put the work of art, which was in an artist's studio, and the later bits of its life are unknown to us as of now, but when it comes out of the studio and is put in the market, it becomes this icon for a much larger conversation about the relationship between the artist and the dealer, the relationship between the dealer and the collector, the relationship between the artist and the broader market, the relationship between the artist and art history. These are all things that we talked about with regard to pricing scripts. These are all things that I've talked to you all about individually in our phone calls. Appadura here is speaking specifically about an economic tournament of value. But what I see is very important is the fact that you can just as easily privilege one of the other facets of information that's pulled into this tournament within the same conversation. So to walk into a place where a work of art is on view for sale, you can also then begin to see it in a different light. It's not just the economic exchange value that's on view, it's also its art historical value. If a work of art is shown in a quote-unquote important gallery or a large gallery or a well-positioned gallery, its relationship to art history is different than if it is shown inside of an alternative space in St. Louis. It is different to see a work of art in say a studio in Oregon than it is to see a work of art in a museum in Paris, and all of those things are relative tournaments of value. So I'm speaking very abstractly about this idea, but I've got a string of slides that I want to show you that where I'm basically going into these tournaments of value, galleries, art fairs. That's actually the only two things I'm showing you here. I'm not showing you any works that I've actually seen inside of nonprofit institutions or larger museums. The slides I'm showing you are specifically from art fairs and galleries. Both of those two sites are specific locations for an economic tournament of value. It's where a monetary number is applied to all of the different facets that feed into the meaning of a work of art. But what I am putting out there in today's lecture is that to go into those spaces is also to engage with other systems of valuation. And so for me to walk through these spaces, I have zero interest in purchasing any of the works that I have on view. Actually, there's one work that I probably would buy if I had the money. Will you be able to spot which one? I'm not going to tell you. But I'm seeing this work specifically because it's important for me to be seeing work because of the nature of what I do for a living, but it's also important for me to see work so that I understand where art is. And so there's both a critical value to the work. I want to know where my critical tastes lie with regard to contemporary art practice. I also want my opinion of contemporary art practice to be informed by seeing a lot of work. And so instead of an economic tournament of value, that's a critical tournament of value. The other side of that is the art historical. To see where artwork is today is important because I've made a living out of talking about where art has been in the past. And so there's an art historical tournament of value that occurs in the same locations as the economic exchanges. And so to villainize an art market is easy because you're only villainizing one aspect. But now that we've digested the reason why the villainy of the art market is a waste of time, or the vilifying, of the art market is a waste of time, we can talk about these other modes of looking at and understanding a work of art. And this is the thing that's going to be really important as we move forward. What is it about the works of art that you are drawn to that is actually pulling you in? What is it about the works of art that you are seeing that you are taking from that work, conversation pieces, aesthetic decisions, whatever it may be, and putting it into your studio practice? And so when you see these works of art, when you experience them, you're actually engaging with a tournament of value in your own right. You're putting this object in a very specific and periodic event, the event of you seeing it. You are examining it and applying certain markers of value that are not just relative to the status of the artist, the rank of the gallery, the fame of the collector, or the reputation of any of those three. What you're doing is you're applying a different kind of cultural value that is relative to you, your aesthetic practices, your work in the studio, and your critical eye, and also your understanding of art history. So there's lots of different tournaments of value that occur within a gallery structure. And so, to go back to this original idea, how does the art market work for us? I'm going to go through and show you that the art market, because it is trying to sustain itself, because it is here interfacing with its collector base, but also its producer base, and I say here specifically meaning New York City, there's a lot of artwork that's on public view. Now, last week, the week before last, I had the ability to go through a lot of different art viewing establishments. I got to see probably thousands of works of art. And I've culled for you a collection of about 31 images. Those images, some of them are grainy, some of them are fast and a little blurry, some of them are pointed. All of them were taken from a perspective, which is a touch gimmicky, I fully understand, but it's also a way that I like to image myself in the presence of these works of art. And so, for those of you who already do follow me on Instagram or have seen things that I've put on various other social media locations, this will be familiar to you, but for those of you who have not, you're going to see a lot of the back of my head, which is why I'm not doing a video this round. So there it is. There's the back of my head. And I'm looking at a work by a gentleman named Brian O'Doherty. Now, Brian O'Doherty, many years ago, published a book that was a critique of the gallery structure. And this book, which is called Inside the White Cube, now that I'm saying that out loud, I feel like that's not actually the title, but I know it is. So just Brian O'Doherty, White Cube, you'll find the book. I apologize, my notes are missing that information. But Brian O'Doherty's Inside the White Cube was an analysis of the founding of White Cube galleries. Because before, say, the 1950s, there really weren't that many gallery spaces that were specifically white, specifically devoid of information, and specifically designed so that a viewer can have an uninterrupted engagement with a work of art. Now, O'Doherty's book talks about all the different ways in which these galleries developed and why they developed and what that means for looking at art, visually consuming art, as it were, engaging with it, purchasing it. And so really O'Doherty's book sets up the structure, the physical structure that encompasses the tournament of value that I was speaking about before. So the white cube is not just a place for commerce. It's a place for reflection on both the dealer, the critic, the collector, the artist's side, all of their sides, all of their perspectives. It's a place for contemplation. It is also, of course, a place for commerce. You can buy certain things in these various shows if you have enough means and enough access. Both of those things are necessary. O'Doherty's book deals with that. But you're all experts because we already just finished Velthuis's book. And so I'm purposely starting with a work by Brian O'Doherty because talking about his examination of the white cube is a really important way of introducing this, or I think it's a nice way to start off this conversation. So we've gone through the idea of a tournament of value. We understand what that is. Here's a work by an artist who has theorized on the white cube, showing a work that was a commission for a specific white cube. A white cube that all of you have been in. This piece is showing currently at Simone Soubal Gallery, which was the final stop on our walk through the Lower East Side. With the very tall, dark-haired gallerist Simone and I were chatting on one side of the gallery during the previous painting show. But ultimately, what we have here is a work of art that is an installation inside of this white cube. This is a work of art that is probably a thing I will never lay my eyes on again, as sad as that is to say. But that's the nature of these galleries. And that's the thing about the art market. You have to go because they're not going to exist forever. Shows only run for a month, and then once those shows are done, what do? Where can you see these things? So it's important that you get out and that you see all of the things that you can possibly see. So that's important. Go and see these things, and that's why. That's the kind of subtext of today's conversation the art market works for us in a lot of ways because we get to see these things, we get to engage in the tournament of value, but there's also this pervasive sadness from my perspective because these are things, you're seeing things that you might never see again. And because they're going into private collections, there's a lot of limitations to seeing these works after you see them in the gallery. And so thankfully, the gallery, the white cube that O'Doherty analyzed, exists because I and all of you have the ability to see all of this stuff firsthand. We can experience it, we can engage with it, we can even take weird pictures where you actually have to stand in the presence of other human beings and hold your hand behind your head so as to get a photograph of you personally looking at the work of art. A side note on this, what I refer to as the point of view selfie, or the POV selfie. This, I've realized, is an extension of my incredible level of comfort inside of gallery spaces. I have no fear of being seen as a weirdo in these spots because they're just places that I'm really comfortable and that I feel personally kind of initiated into the fold within. Something that I hope all of you also feel within your arts communities, wherever they might be, because in order to actually, I think, defend your work successfully in conversation, defends a more histrionic term there than it necessarily needs to be, but in order to defend your work or talk about your work in these public spaces, you need to first be able to be comfortable in them. And so that's another major reason why you need to be going to all of these spaces. So Simone Sobel Gallery, Brian O'Doherty. Here's a wonky picture of a Tracy Miller painting. This was I saw also at a gallery space in the Lower East Side called Dodge Gallery. This little slideshow is going to run you through a variety of gallery spaces and also some art fairs, and it's in no particular order. So I really just want to talk to you guys today about the act of seeing work and how every one of these pieces that I was seeing was put on display specifically so that somebody could sell it. I am not the person that they're trying to sell the work to, but I am able to engage with the work, to experience the work, to remember the work, because I have the ability to actually see it in person. I'm not seeing this in reportage, which unfortunately I know you guys are right now, but I hope that you get to show me some elements of your local community in this, in not necessarily a similar function, because if you steal the point of view selfie from me, I am going to be angry. So, anyway, keep going. So this is at a gallery. This is an Olafur Eliasson work at the Armory Show. It's a triangular mirror where the material that is used to make the mirror, the dark metallic material, I don't know what exactly it is to make this specific mirror, but it fades out as you get towards the point of the triangle that faces down, and so it's a mirror that kind of fades off. Somebody who wants to buy that work might walk up and say, "Oh, it's an Olafur Eliasson. It's worth a lot of money. It's got a lot of cultural cachet because he had this massive show at PS1 2 years ago. He's a very buzzworthy artist. He had a show at Tate Modern. XYZ are reasons why I think it's worth this amount of money. Beautiful. I have that amount of money. I'm going to purchase it." Great. Tournament of value. From my perspective, I walk up and I see Olafur Eliasson has made a considerable amount of work about the tenuous relationship that we have with the environment and with our global landscape. And so the very nature of creating an equilateral triangle where part of the reflective surface actually fades away communicates to me a lot about the way that we see ourselves in this world, or the potential nature or the potential way that we can see ourselves in this world as being only something that fades away, something that is not fully present in the conversation, in the landscape. There's a lot of other critical ways that I approach this work that have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that somebody might be interested in buying it. So, boom, second tournament of value. In the center here we have a collage work by an artist named Scott Hugg. This was at an art fair that's called Spring Break, which is put together generally by curators. So curators are chosen and then they choose artists to put on view. I would argue that that is a little too identical to the way that other gallerists curate their own booths, because oftentimes in art fairs, when you walk into a booth, there's a variety of artists that are represented by the gallery. Those works are chosen specifically by the gallerist, and those artists are chosen by the gallerist as well. And so the gallerist, in choosing those artists and in choosing those works, inhabits the role of the curator. And so therefore having a curatorial show or a curator-focused exhibition or art fair doesn't make much sense, but that's just me being my normal hypercritical self. Also at the same fair, we have artist Scott Avery, who is performing a lie detector test on participants of the fair. Basically anyone who comes into the fair can sit down to a short stream of questions about positionality and political identity, and in front of a live audience while on a lie detector test. And this kind of participation is not something that you see necessarily all the time inside of the fair structure, So yes, in that regard, I will say that this trumps other fair experiences that I've had. But I don't know what the but was there, but ultimately that's what's going on. He's demanding a certain level of collaboration with his audience. This is what talking about last semester's terminology, this would be a socially engaged artistic project by Scott Avery. This is another socially engaged artistic project by a gentleman named Sean Fader. Sean Fader is the performer there. He's the shirtless one. This project is referred to as the Wishing Pelt, where Fader stands in a room looking obliquely into a corner while being very well lit and while standing on a white pedestal. Viewers are asked to enter the space. You walk up to this performer who is structuring himself almost as if he is an oracle. And you are to put your hand on his chest and you are to whisper a wish into his ear. And then the hitch there is that you whisper the wish into your ear while someone else is taking a picture of you doing this at the door. And this is the person who took this picture was the person who is kind of stewarding people into the space. And then you have to publish this in some sort of social media network, hashtagging the project so that there is some sort of broader social or very public means of showing that you have just cast a wish. So it's this, in Fader's conversation about the work, he talks a little bit about how this idea of a push-pull between what is excessively private and what is obliquely public. And yeah, so this is me participating in this thing. So this is me looking down a string of booths at the Volta Art Fair. Volta was one of, I think, 7 art fairs in the city over the 2 weeks ago. This is what art fairs look like. So if you look specifically on the right hand side, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little black plaques that peek out at the very top of a white wall. That means that there are 5 different galleries on that one side. There are as many on the opposite side, and this is one of, I think, 6 rows, 6 rows on 2 floors of this art fair. So I'm not even going to quickly do the math. There's a hell of a lot of art. And it looks like this. This is what an art fair is. It's not necessarily that ostentatious. It's not that... There are certain art fairs that are catered much more to an older, wealthier set. So there's like more niceties around. People are drinking champagne around, like blah, blah, blah. All those kind of things that you associate with like the lifestyles of the rich and famous. I'm not that rich or that famous. I'm not rich at all or famous at all. But this is the experience of the everyday person in an art fair. You're walking around, you're carrying your coat, you're looking at way too many things, and at the same time you're also looking at way too many people, and so it's hard to kind of justify where your eye is going. A lot of people that frequent fairs talk about the fatigue of visual consumption. You know, it's part of it. If we have 1 week where all of these people show up to New York and put what they think is their best work on view, then I am certainly going to be interested in seeing it, fatigue or not. And sure, it might not be their best work, but it's at least their most marketable, and that says something. Inside of that Volta Fair, I saw this really nice work by John Cox. He's represented by a gallery in Nassau, in Jamaica, and he uses repurposed rubber material and makes these really interesting sculptures. This one I happened to really enjoy. It was also at a less dense part of the show, and so I was able to take this picture. And the interesting thing is there you can see on the wall above the label for the work, there's a little dot, just to reinforce the fact that this is a commercial sphere. You are seeing things that are being sold at that moment. Certain fairs will just take it immediately off the wall. They have a backstock of other work that they will flip out. And so you always have works that are always for sale on view in these booths. But other galleries, other dealers want to do it differently, and so they don't have any fear of putting a little red dot, because they, operating as a curator, have selected a specific design for their show, and to sell a work and therefore remove it from that exhibition kind of goes counter to what they want to do, to the way they want to present themselves. Here we have two works. On the left, the large circular painting is by Carolina Wells Chandler, and on the right we have a large rectangular painting by Valerie Estabrook. Obviously you can make out the words that are written on top of those toaster pastries. Fuck you, suck my dick. Those are on toaster pastries, but that's an entirely acrylic painting, so that's not a photograph. That's just the way that the artist decided to depict this idea. Next to it is a thing that I believe the title of the work was Cowabunga Pizza, and so it's this very large, very globby, or like grotesque is probably the right word, painting of a pizza. I like that they're both about food. It was in a really interesting little aspect of the spring break art fair that was curated by this one guy, Benjamin Sutton, and all of it had to do with decadence. And I thought that these two works spoke really nicely to the idea of the decadent behavior. You know, this huge pizza, the idea of your pastries talking back to you. Now, Stratton, you and I, during our conversation, talked a lot about, or briefly about, my seeing a lot of older photographers, or photographers long since gone, photographers is the easiest way to say that, on view. And this is me looking at this really exquisite little print of a Brissaille photograph. Brissaille, for those of you who don't know, is a really highly regarded surrealist photographer, and given that the nature of photography, specifically in the 1930s and 1940s, was the limitation of photography is that you're dealing with concrete events, and so the idea of having some sort of interior conversation in the 1930s, given the technological capabilities back then, it's impressive to see a really well executed internal or interior perspective in photography, specifically aligning with surrealist aesthetics. Brissaille does it wonderfully, and this is one of those things that I would not have had the opportunity to see in person had somebody not wanted to put it on view to sell. And so this is one way that the market is working for us. This is Blair. I want to call your attention specifically to this guy, Waldemar Cordiero. This is a photograph. He builds these tiny sets and then photographs them, but he does it in a way that doesn't make you. It's not like he's more explicit with his the structure of the dioramas than, say, a Thomas Demand. Really interesting guy, really interesting photographs. Obviously my little cell phone pic is not that high quality, but it's the best I could do, and at least I remembered his name. Here we have a painting by Klaus Merkel, a German artist who got his rise in the late 1970s, early 1980s, making this systematic abstraction. Part of his mainstay kind of came out of the Gerhard Richter school of German painting. In this newer body of work, he's appropriating actually his own artistic styles. So he's going back through his visual lexicon and pulling out different moments that he sees as relating very nicely to creating a kind of a full biographical body of work. This is new work referencing old work, all of which is referencing his own production. And so there's this nice sense of the diary at play here. This gallery had quite a few of these on view, and so it was really nice to see the spread of them. They're all very refined in their painting techniques. They all, obviously, because they're appropriating from previous work, encompass the same or similar palettes. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on here inside of these works. This is a work by Charlie White. Charlie White is a photographer that's been on my radar for a lot longer than I can imagine. I'm surprised how long I've known of his work. Something like since 2000, I think, might be the first time I encountered his work. Anyway, he's a photographer that deals also a lot with in-studio work, and so for this, there were 4 different prints, all of the same idea. This grid draftsman paper that's used not only as a backdrop but also is used to cover the piece of furniture the model is sitting on, and then used as a hand prop in the photograph. And so there's all of these references to the idea of a measured or a measured perspective. White has routinely played with the idea of digital intervention. He has used digital intervention a lot in his work, but he always roots it in a very concrete terrestrial world. They always make visual sense, even if 1 or 2 elements inside the picture is off. And this, I think, is a really nice move for him, kind of out of sci-fi special effects and into something that is explicitly concrete. So in the midst of going to art fairs, you can also pop into the galleries, because the galleries are still open. And so this is Candy Jernigan. She was an artist whose work was also very diaristic. That's a word that's come up quite often. And in these works, these are 2 different pieces of toilet paper that Jernigan collected, one at the Louvre, one at the Musée d'Orsay, and they are her reminiscences of time spent in Paris in April. And I specifically took this picture because of my relationship to the idea of Paris in April, because the only time I've been to Paris was in April, and it was my honeymoon, and oh, it's cute, right? All right, this is Nicholas Gambarov. This was at another art fair known as the Independent. And the Independent usually highlights, this is in the art fair that Elizabeth D. put on. And I put up that video and told you explicitly not to watch the whole thing, of her and Josh Baer talking about mid-level galleries and large galleries and super galleries, or whatever the nomenclature they had for that. But this is it. So the Independent selects a variety of galleries that by and large operate under identical aesthetic systems. They show work that is youthful but well considered, very discursive, very of the Nouveau Art Academy, and so going into the Independent is a bit like going for a gallery walk, almost more so than a normal fair, because it's a much more curated space. The booths are less clearly defined with rectilinear walls. There's much more of a playful bleeding between projects and spaces. But that said, I've been to the Independent for 3 years. The Independent generally looks the same every time. The works are really good, but the structure of the way the works are put on view is identical. In the same way that I've been going to the Armory show for a lot of years, it looks exactly the same. The subsidiary fairs, this year I went to Volta, previous years I've been to other of these subsidiaries, they all look the same. So there is this kind of redundancy to the structure. But with all that said, with a structure that is redundant, the work is able to shine a little more. And of course I'm stopping on like the blurriest slide I'm showing you of this Gambroff mask with a shirt, a men's Oxford shirt hanging down, and this is wedged into a corner. It's a really quite awesome work, and yeah, that's why I got my ear in the corner. All right, this is a series of paintings by Sue Tompkins. Sue Tompkins is making paintings that actually, it's always surprising when you see paintings that look brand new, and I say that it's exciting because there's a lot of painters that are still working through the problems of yesteryear, and so to see something where the processing is obviously there, we have a little bit of a Lucio Fontana cutting of the canvas. We have this abstraction, this kind of nebulous sphere of colors in the back. Well, not sphere, but atmosphere. That's the word I was looking for. In the background, a la color field painting, but then you have this word scrolled on it, so there's a little bit of Ed Ruscha there too, but it's handwritten, it's not printed, so it's not Ed Ruscha. So there's like all of these really interesting things to pull the viewer in. And so that's some nice new paintings. This is back at the Armory show. These are 3 costumes by the sculptor Nick Cave, not to be confused with the musician Nick Cave. Awesome sculptors. This is by an artist named Adriano Costo. I scribbled his name down too quickly to be able to read his first name. My apologies there. But I'm pretty sure it's Adriano Costo. And so Costo is a Brazilian artist who uses, like another very famous Brazilian artist, Vic Muniz, who uses material that is culled from the Brazilian countryside or the Brazilian environment to comment on the structure of Brazilian society. Over the summer, we talked about Lygia Clark, and I talked a little bit about her idea, specifically on collage, but I also introduced one of her works. And I told you that like Brazil is awesome because the aesthetic vocabulary that the artists have down there is both European and non-European, and so there's this really great conversation back and forth. I think with this work, with Costa's work, I just got the idea that we're reaching kind of an end point there, and so the tournament of value that I put this one into was kind of a little bit derivative, but also a little bit like late, maybe instead of saying derivative of, I can just say it's a late stage of the same kind of conversations that were first brought up by the Tropicalia generation in 1968, reinforced by the Vic Muniz generation in the late 1980s and early 90s, and is now on view here with Costa's work. And then boom, the Armory show gives you this crazy Michelangelo Pistoletti work. Like, this is a guy who has made a name for himself painting people onto mirrored surfaces. And so when the viewer is standing in front of the mirror, they are both in the painting and outside of the painting. They will never be as in the painting as the figure, but yet the figure has certain aspects that actually come out into the space with you. They're kind of standing with you when you see these works in person. They're just the theory behind them is awesome, and actually there's a really great conversation in the Art and Theory book with Pistoletto, about his work, specifically about the way he uses mirrors. And so to walk into a booth in the Armory show and to see this thing where he has taken an old painting that he has found probably secondhand, probably at some junk store, and has applied this very mildly reflective broken material, it's like shattered mirrors almost, to it, to the points where the painting had actually been scraped away. Or so basically all of the parts on this painting that are silver are sources of damage where there's no paint. The paint has come off of this painting, and so Michelangelo went in there and applied this reflective surface. And so, like, after reading his writing on why he uses mirrors, to come across a work that approaches the same conversation from a different perspective is killer. And to see that kind of stuff is the reason why you go to these fairs. This is Diana Thader. Diana Thader. It's just a thin piece of looks like gold-leafed corrugated roofing material, corrugated metal, and it's hanging in this kind of standard awning format where it's projecting off the wall. It's a very simple gesture, but like a lot of work that harkens or is in conversation with minimalism, that simplicity employs a great deal of meaning, and I'm into it a lot. This is a work by Steve Bishop. This also with the Independent. You know, it's weird when you walk into an art fair and you see two different artists using the exact same quote-unquote non-art material. In this case, it's a men's Oxford shirt. So you had Gambroff, who made the metal mask that hung above the shirt, whereas Bishop here has used the cavity of the front pocket of one of those shirts to do a casted pour of metal. The gallery didn't have a list of what the metal was, and I didn't have the ability to ask them because they were talking to other people. I haven't done my research into what kind of metal he uses, but ultimately you walk up and you see this shirt that's just hanging there, the way I have like 16 shirts hanging about my room right now, but in the pocket there is this space that is filled with this other material. I thought that this work, if I had to choose, if there was like this death match between Gambroff and Bishop, like who wore it best, who did the Oxford shirt the best, I would have to say that Bishop wins for me. I like the simplicity and the minimal nature of the aesthetic. That said, if I had the opportunity to show one of Gambroff's works, I probably would. Alexander Birkin. I'm only showing you the top half of this sculpture, which is a tree or a piece of a no longer living tree that has been wrapped with string in this kind of chaotic web-like way. I took this picture specifically because John, my husband, is doing work that engages with natural materials and textile materials. He's been kind of examining that realm, and so I took this picture and sent it to him because if I can't show him these works in person, I want to send him these pictures, and that's also the impetus behind this lecture. If I can't take you through these spaces and inundate you with an hour's worth of looking at art, I'm going to, or hours and hours and hours and hours worth of looking at art. I mean, I was hoofing it for days. But I can distill it down for you guys into a nice little hour lecture where you get to see a lot of work, but ultimately I want you to be thinking about the fact that I'm given access to all of this work because the market exists. That's the subtext. I've said subtext like 1,000,000 times this lecture, too. All right, this is John Thomas Paradiso. Um, this was a work that was up at a space called the Leslie Lohman Museum of Queer Art. It's basically just referred to as the Leslie Lohman Center. And that center specializes in the display of queer artists. And in this work, you have it's called Leather Pansy. And what Paradiso has done is he has used an embroidery tool, leather, and has embroidered into that leather this image of a pansy. And obviously there's a conversation between the leather and the fey nature of a pansy, or even the name of a pansy, and both of those things' relationship to queer subculture. Really a stellar piece in a show that Audra and Elena, I think you guys could both look into a little bit. It's, at least digitally, it's at the Leslie Lohman Center, and it is called Queer Threads. I believe it just closed, but it was all about how queer artists have used craft-based, specifically thread-based or textile-based materials in order to engage with the conversation. And so, with all the times that I've had conversations with you about whether or not using, an embroidery wheel is, I know they're not called embroidery wheels. I can't remember what the correct term is. Embroidery hoop, maybe. How using those kind of harkens into this domestic sphere, a sphere that's often engaged specifically with women. Here you have people who are questioning gender normality, who are employing those things to almost the same ends. And so it could be a nice way to kind of bracket your positionality as artists engaging with craft material and this other positionality as queer artists. I stopped into a few uptown galleries when I tried to go to the Whitney Biennial. I saw there was a line at the Whitney Biennial, and so I'll just go back some other day when it's quieter. But I was able to see this awesome painting by Damien Loeb. It's blurry because it's almost impossible to photograph this work, specifically because it's so well painted. To see this thing in person, you feel as though you are looking at a deep space photograph. It's photorealistic work of deep space photography. And the redundancy of space paintings in today's day and age is we're hitting kind of a critical mass with that, and it's getting kind of frustrating. But to see it done so masterfully, and it really was transfixing, because he didn't forsake the act of painting for the trompe l'oeil of outer space. He kind of fused the two together and said really wonderfully that painting offers this perspective into other spaces, into other realities, but realities that we have enough stock in that we continue the conversation around painting. And he's using deep space photography as a way of commenting back on that investment into painting. So it was really, really killer. This was showing at Aquavella Gallery, which is one of the kind of the blue chip galleries in the country. It's one of the few spaces where I have been told that I was in sitting in one of their offices, that I was in the presence of a work of art that was worth, I don't know, like $5 million or something. It was this little Georges Braque canvas from the Cubist days. And I think the dealer was kind of lying to us, because I would imagine that thing would sell for about 10 million, if not 20. But what are you going to do? I'm not going to buy it. I got to see it, though. My eyes remember it. All right. Now, I know that when I invited a lot of you to a performance that I had at my space last summer, that more second years showed up than first years. But Stratton, you might remember that when you came to that show, you were asked to make drawings on sheets of paper that replicated the stationery at hotels. That was a reference to artist Martin Kippenberger, who had a huge show up at this gallery called Skarstedt Gallery. And this is one of his drawings on those hotel stationery. Awesome show. Yeah. Like, this kind of thing, Kippenberger has been the subject of a variety of different exhibitions, some encompassing his entire production, but really to see the variety of works that they had centering around one specific project that he did rather late in his career was beyond worth it. I think it was just, yeah, it was awesome. And then I went down to the Lower East Side again. I've been through so many of those spaces, and I saw Ken Akeshi's paintings. A few of these paintings are on view at the Whitney Biennial, but what you see here are two flat screen televisions that are mounted to the wall on their side, with power cords running down and plugging into various outlets near the floor of the wall. But on the surface of those flat screens, Ken Akeshi has used regular oil paint to make abstract gestural marks. Now, when I saw these works of art, my first response was, we finally got here. Meaning, we, as a Western culture, painting is our privileged media of choice when it comes to artistic practices. All of the different discourses around paintings being referred to as screens, being referred to as sources of information. When we get into the conversation around Jean Baudrillard's contribution to the anti-aesthetic, a lot of this stuff will come a little bit more to the fore. But, after seeing hundreds of years of painting history, and 80 of those years coinciding with the development of television, it's really kind of fascinating that we've finally gotten to the point where an artist has found a really compelling way to present our relationship to television and television's relationship to painting, and where those two things overlap, because there is a great deal of overlap. A painting is a screen of information, a television is a screen for information. Abstract painting has oblique references that are often difficult to ascertain. A painted over television screen on its side also has oblique references that are difficult to ascertain. So kudos to you, Ken Akeshi, and thank you, Rena Spallings, for putting it on view for me. This adorable little sculpture, and yes, I just said adorable, and I'm sure that Ezra Tesler, the artist behind this work, would not like that, or maybe he would, who the hell knows. I really enjoy this little guy, and it was in a small gallery in the Lower East Side that I had not been to yet, and so it was really nice to walk into these small spaces and to see work that you really appreciate, because it's there. Yay! Similarly, I went to a space on the Lower East Side, a gallery whose name I have known for a long time, Rachel Uffner. She shows a lot of female artists. She has been a mainstay in the Lower East Side for almost the entirety of its most recent White Cube gallery development. But Rachel Uffner, business is going well, and so she was able to move to a much larger space in kind of near to where we went as a class to Lisa Cooley and Laura Gitlin on Norfolk Street. She's one block over. And this is a painting show by female artist Joanna Greenbaum, and it was awesome. And there's my chin. Yet another downtown or Lower East Side gallery has upped its ante. Miguel Abreu has also been on the Lower East Side for quite some time, and he's just opened up a massive new gallery space. showing works that I'm not photographing here. Instead, he has a small side gallery where he's showing works by artists that he represents. This is a work by Blake Rain. And what you can see here maybe is a large felt letter A. So it's a large lowercase letter A that's cut out of felt, and it's attached to a white canvas and kind of hanging there. It's a really quite, it was awesome. It was just really nice to see. Again, a very simple idea, but a simple idea that comes with a great deal of meaning behind it. Here's a picture of me and also my reflection inside of this really compelling new body of work by Mika Tajima. I think I showed you one of Mika Tajima's works. I will be showing more of her work, or another object of hers, in over this next summer. This is a resin cast, a colored resin cast, and so it may look like a Mark Rothko under Plexi, but it is actually relatively translucent at certain points, and so it's this really nice conversation with a specific art history, but made new through a different manipulation of materials. And as we near the end of our time, I want to talk to you about how so that's all. A lot of that's very, very new work, with the exception of some things like the Martin Kippenberger show. But to see works like this one, which is only a fraction of a new work by Tony Orsler, was just awesome. Tony Orsler is made famous by stuffing small, almost pillow-like things, putting them under furniture and then projecting a talking face onto them. And oftentimes these speeches would be relative to anxieties felt by people, and so it was kind of like agoraphobic or xenophobic. Like there's these kind of angsty little mouths underneath furniture. But Orsler's been experimenting with new things, and those new things are not on view at public institutions yet. If a public institution wants to show you a Tony Orsler, they're going to go for the Orsler that everybody knows, that is recognizable. But if a gallery is trying to get an interested collector to look at Orsler's new work, they need to do it in an art fair. That's a good arena for it. And so, for me, I get to see this work that institutions are too bashful to show because they don't know how it's going to be critically received, blah, blah, blah. But the gallery is willing to take that chance, and so thank you for putting that on view at the Armory Show. But finally, last image was this one, and holy moly, Sean Kelly Gallery in New York City represents the estate of Joseph Beuys, and walking through the Armory Show, when you've seen a million different works of art, you've like accidentally bumped into hundreds of people and hundreds of huge expensive bags, to walk into this small space in the back of a booth that is completely cordoned off and is only showing the work of Joseph Beuys was like my little art historian heart melting. You don't see these works collected in this capacity. You don't see the caliber of work that was collected in this capacity. I'm only showing you one. It's his most recognizable object. It's his felt suit. Other institutions have displayed this. Museums have often shown this. But to see this thing without this intensity of an institutional wall, in this small, confined space where you're surrounded entirely by other objects by Joseph Beuys, it's an experience that you're not going to get at a museum. You're not going to get even in a private collector's home, because these objects are going to be sold and dispersed around the world. Instead, you have this art fair where you have the ability to just be in this space with this thing and to just experience it. And so, yes, all of these objects that I've shown you are put on view so that they could be sold. But as I've spent the last hour, 4 minutes and 25 seconds talking to you, it really is a lot more. There's more going on. There's one way of looking at it, There's one tournament of value that people spend too much time laboring over, and that's the economy, when we can look at them in this variety of other ways. And so with that, I'm closing the longest lecture of our term and saying I look forward to hearing you guys report back what you're looking at, because it's awesome.